How's it going, everybody? My name is Kyle O'Grady. I'm a thru hiker. I'm a backpacker. I'm a huge hiking nerd. And every single week on this podcast, I chat with other thru hikers and other backpackers and other hiking nerds about their experiences on the trail. And this episode is a good one. My friend Brandon Sopher is back on the show. Brandon and I hiked a lot of the PCT together this past year, 2022. And for this episode, we wanted to kind of have a theme. We went through a bunch of different things that we wish we had done differently on the PCT. And some of Brandon's were more beginner focused because he had never thru hiked before, but not all of them. I feel like at the beginning of the episode, I kind of made a comment like, oh, like all Brandon's are going to be like beginner stuff. And that didn't really turn out to be true. Some of them were, but not all of them. And we got deep, especially towards the end of the episode. We got real deep. And of course, we had plenty of interesting, funny, crazy stories from our PCT hike thrown in the mix as well. So Brandon, when you hear this, thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to get into the episode, but real quick, don't skip, don't do it. 5-star reviews. I said this last week. I know that every single podcast you listen to at the beginning, they're like, oh, like leave us a 5. Like it actually matters. There's a reason why every single podcast you listen to says this. It really, really matters. It helps get the show out to more people. It helps show people that it's worth listening to. So please leave a 5-star review on whatever app you're listening on. I would really appreciate that. And with that said, let's get into it. Episode number 132 with Brandon, not Gopher, but Brandon Sopher. I'm here with the one and only Brandon Gopher. How's it going, Mr. Gopher?
Oh, it's going fabulous.
Did you notice that I put your name as Brandon Gopher in the chat?
I did. I was laughing about it. I thought that was like a Groundhog Day shout out, you're just messing.
Is it almost Groundhog Day?
I think it was last week. I had heard whisperings that Groundhog Day was. I don't know the verdict though. If we're in spring or if we got winter coming.
I don't know.
We're sticking around.
Based on a lot of the things I've been seeing, my friends that live up north post today, it seems like we're definitely still in winter because it's like negative. It was like -9 in Burlington this morning or something like that.
Bro, Dallas was just shut down for like 3 days because, well, it's laughable probably to Northerners, but yeah, I mean, we just had like an inch maybe of snow and some ice, and everybody just stayed inside for 3 full days.
Oh, shit. Everybody died. No. Anyways, Brandon Sopher is his actual name, and for those of you that watched the PCT videos last summer, it's crazy that I have to say last summer now. It doesn't even seem like it was that long ago, but you should be familiar with Brandon. He was also a guest on an episode, I don't know how many weeks ago, probably like a month ago or so, something like that. But just as a quick refresher, Brandon and I and Flossie hiked a good chunk of the PCT together. Flossie and I hiked with him more than anybody else, and we got to know each other pretty well. And so, of course, I want to have him back on, dude. I love just chatting with my friends on this episode. This is also going to be an interesting one because I'm like a little bit sick, if you couldn't tell from my voice. I'm not like that sick. I'm just like kind of congested and stuffy. And then Brandon told me he was hungover, so we'll do our best here. We should be just fine. So the theme for this episode, because Brandon's been on before, rather than just going through his entire story again, we're going to go through a list of things that we wish we might have done a little bit differently on our PCT hikes. And just to give some context to this, obviously, I had thru hiked before, so I had quite a bit of experience. But Brandon, that was not the case for you, huh?
It was not. No, I had never. I mean, I did one backpacking trip in New Zealand, but it was nothing like this, and I prepared even less for the PCT than I did for that backpacking trip in New Zealand. So yeah, I got a lot of things that I do differently.
So I think that's important context because we haven't told each other like what our items are yet for the list. So I'm sure some of them might be the same, but I feel like a lot of them What do you think?
I think that if you're prefacing this so that people don't judge me for my obvious answers, I think you're the
No,
only one that
no, no.
you're the one who judged me the most out on the trail. So
Maybe a little bit. No, it's okay though. I just think it's important that people understand like that frame of reference because yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your items are, so maybe they're not that bad, but maybe they are. No, just kidding. But we'll see. We'll see. Either way, we're gonna jump into him here. Brandon, thank you for coming back on and doing another episode.
of course,
And do you want me to start with my first one, or do you want to start with yours?
let me start with mine.
Okay, let's do it.
Let me start with mine. Okay. A lot of mine have to do with what I would have done, leading up to the trail, like how much, number one, preparing, because I kind of went into it. I looked at some videos and stuff and read some articles online, but in terms of like, was I physically ready? Did I have any experience hiking? No. So my first one would be like doing a shakedown before I get out to the trail. Just spend 3 or 4 days hiking 40 to 50 miles or whatever with all the gear that I was going to have. And I think that would have weaned out a lot of stuff that I dealt with in the first week, 2 weeks. And, and also, yeah, it just, I would have trained. Like my body was not physically prepared. That's kind of two. I mean, I would have done a shakedown and I would have actually walked some miles so that my body could be prepared because that would have made the first section a lot more enjoyable
Yeah.
and I would have known what I was signing up for.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean it's a very basic one, but you got to keep in mind that like there's a lot of very experienced people who listen to this podcast, and there's also a lot of people that have never through hiked and maybe are preparing for one or just daydreaming about doing one in the future. So that's another reason why I think we're probably a good mix for this episode because I think mine, like I said, are a little bit more in depth, and yours are a little bit more like beginner focused.
yeah,
Assuming I don't know
yeah,
what the rest of them are going to be, but I think that's a very good one. And this is a piece of advice that I give to people all the time that are like thinking about doing their first through hike. Like a shakedown hike is such a good idea. You don't even have to do a long one. Like I think you said like 40 or 50 miles there or whatever you said. But like even if it's
hmm
just a night, like the more the better for sure. But like even if it's just a night using your gear to kind of get more familiar with it. I don't know. What are some of the things that you think you would have changed gear wise if you had gone on like a short shakedown hike before the PCT?
um I mean I'm trying to think back because I know that I lost a lot of stuff or dropped a lot of stuff as I went, but I mean just things like how much food I packed, unnecessary items.
Like
I
what?
didn't have
What's one unnecessary item?
a lot of it has to do with food, I would say, but I had like my rain jacket, and I mean, I would have had a lighter rain jacket, like rain, set,
Yeah.
um, and I mean, I sent that home after after week three, and because even when you get rained on in the desert, it doesn't really last that
Wait,
long,
wait,
and
you didn't have it. You sent your rain jacket home?
yeah, I did.
Oh, damn.
Dude, I after that first couple weeks, I was like, you know what? I'm sending everything home unless I absolutely need it. And well, I
It's
don't remember what week it was, but yeah, no, the food was a big one. Just how much food I thought I just couldn't conceptualize the fact that you're only packing or how much food I would eat even
yeah.
in like 3, 4 days. So I mean, my mom probably had a hand in this, being afraid that I was going to starve out there. But I mean, I had like a giant thing of peanut butter, two big salami um, sticks or whatever, and I mean, just so much food that I wouldn't have been able to eat like in a week and a half. And yeah, so that all that led up to kind of hurting myself at the beginning, or just my body was hurting more than it probably should have, and
Yeah.
especially if I would have trained beforehand. But in terms of gear stuff, I would say the Z-Packs tent. So I had a Soloplex. I hadn't even slept in that tent before I went out there, and that as much as I loved how light it was, and that's so cool because I'd never experienced any kind of tent camping like that. Um, it was pretty small for me, and so I think that's another thing that I would have changed out. Not in terms of just it being too heavy, but just
Yeah,
something I
because
would have done
how tall are
differently.
you?
6'5".
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on Z-Pack stuff, but I don't they make like the Altaplex, like
They do.
a bigger
Yeah.
version of the Solo or the Plex Solo. I feel like, yeah, that might have been better for you. The Plex Solo is perfect for me, but I'm only 5'10", so it makes sense. And then in terms of the food, like it's so hard to judge how much food you need to carry, so don't beat yourself up for that one too much. And I think Flossie and I probably talked about this with you quite a bit when we were out there. It's like I still feel like even after all the miles that I've done at this point, I still never get the food exactly right. Like it's a lot more dialed than it was when I first started, and probably a lot more dialed than yours was when you first started. But like, it's still you never nail it. Like maybe some guy out there does, but for the most part, I almost never get the food exactly right. I feel like I always have too much, and then sometimes, rarely, not enough. It's really hard to just absolutely nail that. So I think that's a pretty common one. And then the physical training one is definitely a big one too. I'm glad you threw that one out there, because I feel like I don't think I see this advice as much anymore, but when I was first getting into thru hiking, before I actually did it, but just when I started like researching about it and stuff when I was younger, I feel like one common piece of advice I saw was like, oh, like don't worry that much about physical training because you can just hike yourself into shape. And like that is true, but it's definitely better to train beforehand, like no doubt about it. But I don't know, it didn't seem like you were still in pretty good shape when you started.
Yeah, well, it's not even so much about what shape I was in. I would say I just feel like you're putting yourself at a greater risk of getting injured and then not being
Yeah,
able to continue
definitely.
if you don't harden your legs and get some calluses on your feet before you get out there. And it'll just make it more enjoyable on the whole. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Because I mean, I play a lot of sports and stuff. I was like, I'm like you just said, I'll just hike myself into shape and I'll figure it out. But um, yeah, just things popped up that probably wouldn't have had I put a little more effort and time into preparing. So
Yeah, definitely. And to be clear, there's really no way to like hit the trail like in perfect hiker shape unless you just came from another like thru hike basically. So there's always going to be like that physical adjustment period, but the
yeah,
more like you can train, definitely the better. You can't go too much either and hurt yourself like I kind of did. Although I don't think that was because I was training too much. I think that was, I don't even know how the hell that happened, but obviously you don't want to go overboard, but it is definitely going to be worthwhile to train, even if it's just like getting out and walking, 10, 15 miles a week or whatever you can manage with your schedule before the trail. It's
yeah.
definitely going to help. Or just doing a lot of shakedown hikes too. Definitely going to be helpful. So this one for me, Brandon,
hmm
I don't really, this is probably not going to be something that bothered you, at least maybe not until you started hiking with us. But I feel like this is more of a thing for Flossie and I. And so I'd be interested to hear your perspective kind of looking at it from the outside, and hearing us kind of struggle with this. So probably the number one thing that I wish that I had done differently, and we actually talked about this a little bit on the last episode that we did together. I wish that we, as in Flossie and I, had been less focused on continuous footsteps, because once we broke those continuous footsteps because of fire closures, it really just felt like that put a huge damper on the hike. And as I talked about in the last episode, I'm really torn on this one, because on one hand, like I'm saying it right now, like it definitely would have made for a better experience if we weren't so focused on this. But on the other hand, like at my core, I still want continuous footsteps whenever I can possibly get them. And whenever I'm hiking a trail in the future where it's realistic to do so, I'm going to pursue that. Like there's no doubt in my mind that that's what I want to do. But like for the PCT, it just doesn't really make as much sense. So I don't know. I'm sure you noticed Flossie and I kind of struggling with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
And
For sure.
like, and it's like, I don't know what, so you kind of were like rolling with us for a long time. Was that ever something that you became like super focused on, or was it more just, I don't know?
I mean, my expectations were just a little different because I mean, it was my first through hike, and the way I looked at it, my whole mindset was this is just going to be an epic adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and however it shakes out, if I can only hike 500 miles, or you know, well, I mean, I was pretty bent on continuing to go no matter what came up, so I wasn't really worried about that, but just kind of seeing what came my way, and depending on who I met and just the things that happened out there, you just never know. And so I was very open to, know, things changing and accepting it. But I totally understand if you set a goal in your mind and there's like an OCD level of it where it's like you
Yeah.
just want to do the whole thing. And I mean, with the PCT, as you know, and I learned, like, it's just out of your control. So many things are out of your control while you're out there,
Oh
and
yeah.
specifically with wildfires. And so I think it wasn't hard for me to just accept it and move fast and realize, like, I'm here for the journey and the experience, and um, you know, can't it can't do anything about closures or breaking I didn't even know what continuous footsteps meant. I mean, obviously, I could probably have worked out what that phrase meant, but I'd never even heard that until y'all were talking about it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I find it really interesting. This is a little bit unrelated, but kind of related to what you just said. I find it so interesting that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but from what you just said there, it kind of sounds like your main objective was to just like have this adventure. Yeah. Is that fair?
yeah, yeah,
So
we'll sum it up.
I find it like so incredible that you pushed through, not even that you just made it so far, but that you pushed through so much pain. Because again, everybody listening, go back and listen to our last episode if you want to hear about a lot of that. But Brandon had it pretty rough at the beginning. He dealt with a lot of injuries, and not even at the beginning, like even, through most of the desert, I think, even into the Sierra, like you were dealing with various ailments. And so I just find it pretty incredible that you, like, if the main objective was just to have an adventure, that you like pushed through so much like hardship. Because I feel like a lot of people, if that's their main goal, after like a couple weeks, they're like, okay, I've definitely had an adventure, but like this hurts and I'm adventured out. Like I'm ready to go sit on the couch. So like, I don't know. Like, I feel like there must have been something a little bit more there than just the adventure.
Well, I didn't say that my goal was to like have fun and it be like peachy the entire time. Like, to me, an
Okay.
adventure, is a lot of times it's a lot of suffering, and it's a lot of trying to find your way through. And I mean, that is exactly what I wanted, like, to test myself, see what I was made of, not just
Hmm.
physically, but mentally, and just to meet new people, be challenged by new people, and I don't know, just all of that. So I expected hardships, and I like I like the idea of going into an adventure not knowing exactly what those hardships are going to be, but knowing or expecting myself to like be able to push through. So when that stuff came up, while it was really disappointing, namely because I didn't know if I'd be able to continue going, um, it was easier to take it in stride just because, I expected it to not just be a walk in the park
Yeah.
because I didn't know what I was getting myself into, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you kind of narrowed down, or maybe even broadened out the definition of adventure a little bit more, because I feel like when I think of people who do a through hike to have an adventure, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like obviously, like a through hike is 100% an adventure, like no matter how you slice it. But like, I just think of people going out to have an adventure thinking that it's just going to be like kind of like how you see it on social media, or a lot of social media anyways, not all of it, but um just like this epic thing and all these beautiful views and all these amazing people, and you get all that stuff obviously, but like I feel like for you, based on what you just said there, the adventure was kind of, or the hardship was kind of built into the adventure. And I again, I'm generalizing here, and it really is different for everybody, clearly. But I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of people, it seems like their idea of an adventure is more just like all the good stuff, and they don't really think about the bad stuff as much, maybe. And so I think that's interesting, honestly. Like you're kind of reframing how I picture an adventure which is cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you would say that the Appalachian Trail meant so much to you because only like how much you had to push through and like
Yeah.
all of the beauty and struggle that you had to go through. And that's why it means so much. And so I kind of tie those two together,
Hmm.
pain and the excitement of it.
I like it. I like it, Brandon. Brandon Gopher. Um, I'm sure you've never been called that before in your life, have you?
Dude, that's how whenever like, what is your last name? It's like, it's Sopher, rhymes with gopher. I'm like, okay. That's usually a go-to, actually.
Okay, so what's the next one on your list? Things you wish you would have done differently on the PCT.
I think that, let's see, a couple like just quick ones that are kind of simple, but man, I wish I'd had that zip chip earlier. I mean, this is kind of silly, but dude, I
Yes.
love that zip chip. I think I would have brought that at the beginning because super freaking lightweight and just endless entertainment. So,
Yeah, man. I'm one of these ultralight people. I don't like to carry a lot of luxuries except for my 3 pounds of camera gear, as the commenters on YouTube love to point out every time I say that. But generally speaking, yeah, like not too many luxuries. But like the zip chip, dude, we must have talked about this in the last episode. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
We must. 60 Cent and I talked about it a little bit on our episode. But
Yeah.
like, dude, it's the perfect backpacking luxury item. It weighs nothing. It's indestructible. The only thing is, I'm probably saying exactly what I said in our last episode if we did talk about this. But the only thing you have to keep an eye on is not losing it because it's kind of small. It's basically like a little frisbee, would you say, but it's made of silicone.
Yep, exactly.
You just have to be careful not to lose it. That's the only thing because it's pretty small, but like, oh man, it's so fun.
It
It's so
is.
fun, dude. I wish you would have had that earlier too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Maybe
Like,
I should. Yeah, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say, fuck, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So like probably like a couple weeks, maybe even a month before you actually had it sent out to you, like Brandon was hyping up this zip chip thing, and I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Like I suck at frisbee, like, which is not a frisbee. It's way doper than a frisbee in my opinion. But like, I was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. But
Dude, you're a natural. You picked it up so fast. That's
dude,
what
it's
makes it
so
fun,
fun.
is when people can zip it around. And
And
you and
it's
Flossie are freaking naturals at it.
and it's so good for backpacking too, not only because it's small and lightweight and stuff, but also because you can throw it around trees and you can make like obstacle courses with it, like in the woods. Like no matter what environment you're in, like you can have fun with that thing, whether it was like a parking lot when we were in town or like a super steep forested campsite. Like we could always find a way to make it fun. So I wish you had the zip chip
Mhm.
earlier too. Didn't you bring a book at the start?
I picked up a book. Good memory. I picked up a book in Mount Laguna whenever I was just like hiking a couple, miles a day or whatever. And so, yeah, that lasted like 3 days. I was like, what am I doing?
He had the book, but not the zip chip. Come on, Brandon.
I know.
Gotta
Things I
learn.
would have done differently.
Gotta learn somehow. Um,
Yeah.
this next one for me is a gear related one. I feel like my gear was pretty dialed for the most part. Um, but, and you'll be able to speak on this because out of all the shit I'm giving you for your gear, you actually brought this piece of gear and I didn't. Um, I wish that I had used gaiters in the desert section. After the desert, it was fine, but in the desert, neither Flossie or I had gaiters. Although it's funny because Flossie had gaiters on the AT when you probably like don't need them. Like I mean, some people like them on the AT too, but like they're far less common. And Flossie had them on the AT, and then he didn't have them on the PCT in the desert when, I don't know, that was the first time in my life I've always been like, like gators are fucking bullshit or whatever stupid attitude that I have. But like hiking through the desert, I thought about it a little bit before we left, but I was like, you know what? I'll just start without them and then I'll see. And the further I got into the desert, the more and more I was like, fuck, dude, I should really have some gaiters. Like I was getting so much stuff in my shoes. It was bad. And the further and further I got, the more I was like, I should just get them. But at the same time, I'm getting close to the end of the desert, so I'm just going to wait. And then it was just this like downward spiral of wanting them even more and suffering even more the further I got because I didn't have them, but then also just being closer to the end. And so that's how I was justifying. I remember, I think it was in Wrightwood, maybe. We were at that hardware store there that was also like an outfitter. And I was like looking at them on the wall, and I was like, I even like picked them up. I was like, man, I almost bought them there, but I didn't.
It's kind of a big decision because you got all the different colors or
styles,
pictures and stuff. If you didn't have one that was calling to you, then I think you made the right choice and not just getting any old gator.
Yeah, I probably should have. I'm telling you, like, I was dumping out my shoes like multiple times a day, and I drag my feet a lot. Flossie said he didn't really regret not having them because he's just, I don't know how he stays so clean all the time, but like that man is just pristine.
He's a very clean person.
He's so clean. Like,
very impressed.
Like his socks, like he'd wear the same socks for a few days in a row and they'd look like they were basically clean. I'm like, dude, how are you doing this? I'm like dumping rocks and freaking bugs and all this shit out of my shoes every 5 miles. And like, man, but I wish I had started with gators in the desert. How was your experience using them?
That's a good one. I didn't start with them because I didn't even know what gators were. But once I saw some people using them, then number one, I think it looked pretty cool, and I wanted to get some cool looking gators. Number two, I feel like, man, whenever the blisters started, it was just because I had holes in my shoes. So I mean, that's kind of a separate issue. But yeah, keeping stuff out of your shoes, keeping your feet clean is so important because once you start going that blister path, and even if you're not capturing like little rocks and stuff, it's just your feet they're going to get dirty no matter what, but you can definitely make a difference by having gaiters and or washing your feet often. And I realized that pretty quickly because, whenever I was getting stuff in my shoes, it would correlate to blisters, and then that would just downward spiral into a whole bunch of stuff. So
Didn't you I don't remember where this was. You might. Wasn't there a campsite one night where there was you and then 2 other hikers that had the same gators, like the same design gators, the fox ones?
Yes. Yeah, there was a couple times where we were in weren't we in not Yellowstone, Yosemite, and I took a picture with 2 other girls, I think here. So that was there was a few other times I think I saw some other foxes out there.
For sure. Brandon had foxes on his gators. They were quite stylish.
I was foxy. Come on.
You were very foxy. This is not on the list, but just a side note. Isn't it crazy that we've been off trail now for just about as long as we were on trail for?
It actually makes me a little sick whenever I think about that.
Makes you sick.
I'm just like, it feels like to me, it almost feels like it didn't happen. Like it's so far removed from any experience. I've talked about this with you before, maybe even on the last podcast, but it's like such a wild experience. And then now here I'm back in Dallas doing my thing, and nobody asks. I don't talk about it with anybody except people that I met with you and people on the trail. And so when I think that like the same amount of time of that incredible experience is already passed since then, the end of that experience, it makes me sad and sick.
Isn't it? It is so crazy. Like, I agree 100%. Like, it's so far removed. Like, I don't know. I feel like this happened on the AT, and I feel like the same thing kind of happened on the PCT. Like, that 4 months or whatever, 4.5 on the AT, just like, it goes by fast when you're out there, but once you get home, it feels like it went by really slow. Like just because there's so much stuff that's packed into that 4.5 month time period that when you think back on all of it, like, I don't know, it just feels like a longer period of time than it actually was. And so when I think back on all the shit that happened on the PCT in that 4 months, and then I think about all the shit that's happened in the 4 months after that leading up to now, it's like, it just feels like these last 4 months went by so much faster. I don't know. It's weird.
Yes. Yeah. Time is different when on the trail and then off trail somehow.
It's so weird. Like, We've been off trail as long as we were on trail for. I don't know. That's blowing my
Yeah.
mind.
I just don't like that. I don't like that.
You don't like that?
No, I
Get back
don't.
out there, dude. You can start the AT. People are starting the AT
You
like
know what?
now.
I am going to get back out there on the PCT specifically, and this can bring us back to our list because this is one that I a thing that I wish I had done differently,
Okay.
and they kind of go hand in hand. So I wish that I would have started earlier in the year because I would have had more time. I think I wouldn't have felt the pressure of pushing it every day, and I mean a lot of that was you just kind of get in the mode where you're hitting miles, and of course like every day you're trying to put in work and progress. But I wish that I would have slowed down more, and I wish that I really like when I'm hiking or camping to just wander, like with no agenda really. And it's a different ball game when you're out there and you're trying to complete this thing. But I think
Yeah.
that if I'd have started earlier and I had more time, um, I think I think I'd have had that option a little more, or maybe just felt the pressure less. It's just hard because you hike with people, and like I started hiking with you guys, and I was, you get into a tempo, and you want to keep up with each other, and everybody's got different feel for what they want to do, and so you kind of adjust to the people that you're with and friends that you make.
Are you
But
trying to blame this on us, Brandon?
no, no, no. In fact, I was trying very hard to make it the opposite of that. um, but yeah, it's just different. Like when I go back out there, it's not to, it's just to walk around and
Yeah.
find a spot to camp and just enjoy nature and try to make it feel less like work every day. And again, that's just the nature of the through hike, and
Yeah.
especially whenever you're up against the winter coming. And so,
Yeah. It's funny. The next one on my list was the exact same thing. Although for maybe slightly different reasons. The next one on my list was that I wish we had started earlier too. I think for me, the main reason was because I feel like we just would have had a better chance of beating the fires. It seems like most of the people, not all of them, to be fair, but most of the people this year who were able to complete the entire trail started earlier, like early April, even March, probably more realistic. Um,
yeah,
and so I think see, I'm going kind of back on my first one, like I'm going back to the continuous footsteps thing, but I just think we would have had a better chance to do that. But having less pressure, having less, yeah, like time pressure, I guess. And again, for those that don't remember, Flossie and I started May 15th. You started what, a few days earlier?
yeah, the 13th, I think.
May 13th. So we started very late. And so in order to make it in time, make it to Canada in time, like we kind of had to keep a pretty good pace. And it would have been nice to not have that pressure. And it's kind of interesting because on the AT, I did the exact same thing. I started on May 14th. I started way later, and it was very stressful at the beginning. But eventually, and I've said this on the show before, that I don't really I don't regret it. Like I don't regret my late start on the AT because eventually I feel like I just got used to it and it was just motivating for me. It was stressful for the first half of the AT especially, but I don't know, like I don't regret it on the AT, but I do regret it on the PCT, partially because of the giving yourself a better chance to make it all the way if you
Hmm.
start earlier, but also hearing you talk about not feeling that pressure and having time to kind of maybe chill out a little bit more, I think was kind of the essence of what you were saying there. That does
Uh,
sound appealing too. It's hard on a through hike. I feel like you have to strike a balance between chasing that goal and keeping a steady pace, but also allowing yourself the opportunities to maybe
yeah,
soak things in a
yeah.
little bit more. And I think that's something that Flossie and I kind of neglected on the PCT a little bit too. But it was just hard with our start date.
It is. And I mean, on the flip side, like it is very easy to get into that mode where you start taking it easy and then you keep taking it easy. And then, a couple of days later, you've only hiked like that never happened to us, but
It happens to a
I
lot of
know
people.
it happened to people that we met out there where it's like, you just get into that mode where you let your guard down a little bit and you start taking it easy. And then it's
Yeah.
really hard to to kind of, motivate yourself back up to doing 20 plus days, which is realistically what you kind of have to do if you're, at least if you started when we did, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing too, I'll throw in, like, keeping a pretty good pace, I think personally is very satisfying too. It's not like it's all just work. It's all just sacrifice. Like, some of the, like, most, like, elated moments I had on the PCT were after, like, some of our biggest days. Not the night hiking, that fucking sucked, but, like, some of our other days. Like, do you remember that day through that stretch through the Sierras where we did like 4 25, 26 mile days in a row? And just like how, like, the first night we were like, holy shit, that was nuts, whatever. Second night we were like, okay, this is pretty badass, but that was crazy, whatever. But then the third night we were all just like fucking dapping each other up and fist bumping at the end of the day.
We're like, feeling ourselves.
It's on video. We were like 23, 25 mile days in a row. And then we did another one, like 420. And it was just like good vibes. And so it was hard. It wasn't always fun doing that, but it is satisfying too. So, like, I really feel like you have to, well, I'm speaking for myself when I say you have to. I feel like I should probably clarify that. I'm not trying to tell people what to do here. I feel like I need to find a balance between keeping a good pace and still doing those big days and getting that satisfaction out of it, because that is very important to me. But at the same time, I think that maybe if we had started earlier, we would have just had a little bit more breathing room on the times where we really didn't want to push it. I think that probably would have helped with Flossie a little bit later on as well. Although then again, we weren't quite as time pressed towards the end because of the fact that we had to skip up because of the fires and stuff. But I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah. It's hard to strike that balance, man. I don't even know if it's possible, really.
Yeah, I think you just gotta do it. Do the thing. Have a little grace for yourself whenever you're not feeling like crushing a big day, and just figure out your own pace. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
hike your own hike, as they say. Don't they say that?
Yeah, some people say that. It's been said. I remember. I feel like you did help, like, me chill out a little bit sometimes. Like, I remember when we were in Lone Pine and we had just done like some gnarly shit. It was our first section in the Sierras and we finally got to Lone Pine. Flossie and I had our whole food incident, and Mount Whitney was in that stretch of trail. It was like a long stretch. It was like 5 days between resupplies too. And we were just so beat up by the time we got to Lone Pine, and I wanted to head out the next day. And like the night before, like shortly before we all went to bed, you and Flossie were kind of like, oh, like maybe we should zero. And like, I was like, no. But like, I went to bed and I started thinking about it. And in my head, secretly, I was like, fuck, we should probably zero tomorrow. And then we woke up in the morning and it didn't take much convincing beyond that. So you guys, especially you, Brandon, definitely helped me like chill out a little bit in regards to some of that stuff. And that was, looking back on it, that was one of the most needed zeros of the whole trail. I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
Dude, you're easy to chill out. All you got to do is start singing some emo songs with you, and then you'll start belting it, and you're good to go.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah, dude, talking about things I would have done differently. Right before Lone Pine, that I would have taken a right on that trail to go to whatever pass that was instead of a left.
We gotta tell this full story. I don't think we talked about this on the last episode.
No, we didn't. So I'd forgotten about it actually until right now.
Yeah, I actually was thinking that you might have brought this up when you were thinking about things you wish you did differently. This is a funny one. Just to give some context real quick, and then I'll let Brandon tell the story. So this is that same stretch of trail we were just talking about. It was from Kennedy Meadows South to Kearsarge Pass, which is where you head out to Lone Pine or Bishop. And it was, Flossie and I both agreed at the time, it was probably the hardest stretch of resupply that we had ever done on a through hike. It was just, you're entering the Sierras, so that's crazy. We did Mount Whitney. Flossie and I, it was mostly my fault actually, kind of miscalculated how much food we needed. So we didn't like starve or anything, but we kind of had to ration our food for part of it. And Flossie had some issues at altitude when we did Mount Whitney. And so it was just, and also the day that we went into town, We did like a 22-mile day, and which is a lot for a town day. You know, you want to do a shorter day so you have time in town. And so it was just a really hard stretch of trail. And so that last day, dude, the day we went into town, we were booking it. We were crushing. We were like, we're just going to put our heads down and get this out of the way as quick as we can. And we're going to pig the fuck out in town because we're starving. And we were just ripping. And then Flossie and I ended up getting a little bit ahead of Brandon. And we ended up getting to the trailhead. And Brandon still wasn't there. And we ended up getting into town and still had no idea where Brandon was. He was keeping a pretty good pace. We were like, damn, I can't believe he got this far behind us. So what happened?
Dude, I think I was ahead of y'all because
Oh, no, you're right. Sorry. Yes.
because
You were
y'all
ahead of us. Yes.
because y'all ended up waiting because you're like, what? Where the hell is he? Like, you should be here because we haven't seen him.
Exactly. I told that wrong. Like, we were, by the time we got to the trailhead, we were talking, we were like, damn, he must be really ripping. We were expecting you to be there waiting for us at the trailhead or something, and then you weren't there, and so we were like, oh, maybe he just went into town without us. Like, we were so confused. But anyways,
Yeah.
what ended up happening?
Dude, I was just, I mean, at this point in the hike, I had found my rhythm. I would like had the things that I'd think through, then I'd like have a book I'd listen to or some music. And I was just like, chapters deep into this book that I love and that I've read before. But anyway, and so we were crushing it. Like we were doing so well and I was feeling great. And I just didn't look at Far Out or Gut Hook or whatever. And I mean, I was just doing my thing, and then as I was hiking, I was going straight down, and that should have been, if I had any sense, like that would have been the first tip off, like immediately, because I knew that we had to go up. We had like another 1,000 feet of elevation to gain before we started doing that long ass climb down to the parking lot, and I was going downhill, straight downhill, and I didn't even think about it. I was like, man, this looks kind of, I don't know why, but this looks different. But that was after like an hour of walking straight down. And
Uh,
it was getting hot in the day. Mosquitoes were starting to come out. Mosquitoes to me are like little taskmasters. Whenever I feel them around me, I feel like I have to keep going as fast as
oh
I
yeah,
can to give them less chance to bite me.
they're
So I'm going as
bad through
fast as I
that
can
section.
downhill. I'm like, man, I'm probably like crushing these guys. Like hopefully they'll catch me or whatever. I don't want to be waiting in the parking lot too long. And then I was like, yeah, I'll just check the map real quick. And as soon as I did, and I saw like how far off the trail I was, man, that was one of the most depressing moments on trail because not only was I like super far, well, I was a mile and a half off trail, but I like had hiked over 1,200 feet like down in an elevation. And so now I had to gain that 1,200 feet back and do the additional 1,000. And we'd already hiked so much that day. And so, dude, I was so pissed, and that was probably the hardest, the most physically challenging part of the trail for me because I was going like 20 yards at a time. By the time I got to is it Kearsarge? Is
Yeah,
what you said?
Kearsarge Pass.
Kearsarge, and I mean, I was just going from one, what are they called when you go back and forth up trail?
Switchback.
Yeah, I was just going from like one switchback and then just taking like a 2 minute break because by the end, dude, I was gassed. And then we got down, um, got a message from y'all. I mean, I realized that y'all would probably go on ahead. I'd hoped y'all had because I was 2 hours behind y'all at that point. And yeah, dude, when getting into Lone Pine, that was purely selfish whenever I was trying to convince you to take a zero
No, we
because
needed it too.
I was struggling.
Yeah, that was. I remember when you finally got to the hotel, like a few hours later, you were just like, you were just destroyed. You were so stoked that you finally made it after all that, but like, oh man, you were down bad.
That was a grind. Chocolate milk, ice cream. I don't think I left like the bed. I know we walked around a little bit, but I mean, oh yeah,
That was
that
a
was
great
rough.
zero. That was much needed. Holy shit, much
Hmm.
needed. Um, all right. The next one
My
on my
turn?
what was that?
Your turn. Is it your turn
I
or
think
my
it
turn?
was. I think it is your turn. Actually, we just went on a huge tangent there, but that's okay. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Um, this is a quick one. I think I would have shipped less boxes.
Okay.
Yeah, so just, kind of on the food, not understanding what it was like with food out there. I think that it's hard for me to say this because I'm super thankful that I had the people who were putting together boxes and stuff, but it's just, you don't really know what you're feeling or what you're liking until you get into that grocery store, and then you can kind of make some game time decisions. And I just I saw how like meticulous and exact y'all were or tried to be with y'all's food,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't really do that with getting stuff that I hadn't packed myself. And so I didn't pack these boxes. I should have prefaced with that. These were boxes that my mom was getting food from friends and family that were hooking me up and helping me out. And so I really shouldn't be complaining, but that's something that I wouldn't have packed as many boxes except for a few different spots where it was required.
Yeah. And another big thing too, and you have a story about this, then you're just so much more reliant on the post office and
Oh yeah.
various places that you have to pick up the boxes, even if it's not the post office. Why don't you tell the story of what happened in Truckee?
Yeah, yeah, man. I was waiting for some shoes because a common theme was I was putting holes in my shoes
Oh,
pretty
okay.
quickly.
This was shoes, not food.
Not
But I mean,
food.
but it's still relevant. Sorry.
No, yeah, it was. But it's exactly like you said. Had I been getting food there, then it would have been the same exact thing because they just were out of sorts and they didn't have the staffing that they needed. But anyways, I ended up having to stay an entire day to get my shoes, which is the most frustrating part about it was that they were there the entire time. They just didn't have the manpower or didn't care enough to to go back there and find it with all the packages. I had to I had to incentivize them with Butterfingers, or the girl at the front. But it all worked out. I mean, talk about adventures and things. You just being flexible. Met some really nice ladies who just like brought me back to their place. That's a weird way to say that, but they they fed me three different meals, and I stayed like in a multi-million dollar place off of this golf course, and it was freaking awesome. But in any case, to your point, yes, you're more reliant on the postal service when you're shipping boxes too, which can be risky.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good story because a lot of the time when people get screwed because of the post office on through hikes, it's more because of their hours, right? It's because they're not open on Sunday, and sometimes they're not even open on Saturday, especially in the small towns. But like, there's even the chance that like, yeah, like they could be open like they were, but they just something's going on and you can't pick up your package. And I had a somewhat similar thing on the AT, except it's different because it wasn't the post office, and I didn't have to wait. I ended up getting it, but I had shipped a pair of shoes to a restaurant slash hotel that held packages for hikers in Stratton, Maine, at the very end of the AT, and I showed up and they were closed, like unexpectedly closed, I think. And like they were supposed to be open according to their hours and stuff. This is a small town. I don't know what happened, but so I was like, shit, like I need my shoes. So I was like calling them, and eventually I convinced like one of the owners to like drive down and get the package for me. So it ended up working out. But like, yeah, man, you're gonna have to rely on shipping things at some point on a through hike.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to things like shoes, obviously, given those two stories there. But like, yeah, if you can minimize that by not sending boxes as much, it's definitely a good piece of advice.
Yeah. It's
And
just most places, most towns, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
most
You're good.
towns have the stuff that you need.
Yeah.
Like there was only a handful of locations that really didn't. So
Yeah, and there's always exceptions too. Like some people have more strict diets, and if that's the case, they might not be able to find everything.
that's true.
But
That's true.
generally speaking, yeah, trying to rely as little as possible on shipping things is definitely the way to go. Okay, so this next one is one that I don't know. Maybe you'll agree that you didn't do this enough, but I kind of don't think you will. And in fact, the way that you handled this, honestly, is a big reason why I put this on my list. So one regret I have, and I knew this even before I met you, before I set foot on the PCT, because this is one of the things that tons of people tell you before you through hike, like you should do this, but I didn't do it. I wish that I had taken more photos of people, of just anything. Like I hardly took any photos. I took a ton of video, obviously, because I was filming it, but I did not take very many photos at all on the PCT. And I really regret that because I love looking back on the videos, but it'd be nice to have even more of that stuff, more photos, stuff that wasn't meant to be posted anywhere. That made it sound like bad. That's not what I meant. I just meant like, more stuff just for me to look back on.
Yeah.
But you were taking 1,000 photos every foot. It felt like you were always taking photos.
I was. Yeah, man. That's it's kind of in line. This is another one off my list, kind of in line with what you just said, but um, that's kind of how I like journal like experiences or whatever. And one of the things that I would have done differently is I wish that I would have written more stuff down. And I think you and Flossie, or not Flossie, you were pretty good about jotting notes down.
Yeah, I was.
And stuff. And I think that's really cool and something that I wish that I had been better about. And I told myself to do that at the beginning, but you just get into the rhythm and you're exhausted at night and you eat dinner. All you want to do is sit there and then go to bed. But I wish that I'd written down thoughts or things that I had seen or talked about, or people that I met. I did a pretty good job at the beginning, but fell off there towards the end. So
it's harder than it sounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I did the same thing on the AT, so I wasn't journaling really. I was just like writing down the mileage for each day and like writing down like a note or two about like just random things. And it's kind of funny. I actually haven't looked back on any of my notes from the PCT yet, but I've looked back on my notes from the AT quite a bit. That might be a fun podcast idea. Like next time you're on, maybe I can like go through my notes and like we can reminisce or see if we can remember anything about the random shit I wrote. But I did find that on the AT, I've probably said this on a previous episode at some point, but a lot of the notes that I wrote, looking back, I have zero recollection of what I was talking about. I wasn't not all of them, probably not even most of them, but there's definitely a number of them where I look back and I'm like, I wrote like ate lunch with old man with beard here, and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. So I'm curious to see, and I knew that going into the PCT, I knew that my notes from the AT weren't as good as they should have been. So I wonder if I don't have them with me right now, but I wonder if when I look back on the PCT ones, they'll be any better. Even just doing that, it literally took like 2 seconds. Actually, I guess calculating the mileage took a little bit longer, but it still wasn't that hard. But even just doing that, like taking the small amount of effort to do that every day was harder than it sounds. Like I was pretty good for like the first half, and then the second half I would start to fall behind, and then it got to the point by the end where I wouldn't even take notes when I was on trail. I would just catch up on everything when we were at the hotels and stuff. So I feel like my notes probably weren't as thorough towards the end, but I don't know. It's nice. It's cool. It's cool too, because on the AT with my notes there, I can like look back and like see exactly where I camped every single night. So like if I hear a story about a certain spot and I'm trying to remember, I can look back and be like, oh yeah, I remember camping there and stuff. So I don't know. It's journaling, like a full on journal. Some people do that, but like that's hard. I definitely, I tried to do that on my very first thru hike attempt ever on the long trail back when I was a high schooler, and I realized after day one that writing an entire like page journal entry for every day is again, there's some people that can do it, but it's a lot harder than it sounds. But
I mean, yeah, let's face it, it's super helpful just in life to do that, but in life, like I tell myself that and I still don't do it. So it was it was a pretty high bar to set that, hey, I'm going to now pick up journaling.
Yeah, exactly.
As I'm picking up through hiking at the same time.
That's a good way to put it. Wow. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I feel like if you journal a lot regularly, then maybe it would be a little bit easier because you're already kind of in the habit of it. But yeah, it's hard on trail. But going back to the photos, like Brandon, you got to upload those photos to an album somewhere so we can see them, because I'm sure there's so many photos in there of like Flossie and I doing stupid shit or just like random memories that have been kind of tucked away that all that will stir up. So I know it's a lot of effort, but it'd be really cool to see those photos.
No, I should, because just in case, I don't know if it's on the cloud. I got to do something just to ensure that all the pictures are safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be fun to go back and reminisce. Someday, whenever we see each other again over campfire, we can just do a slideshow presentation and just drink some beer and look at pictures and videos.
Yes, definitely. Okay, what's the next one on your list?
Let's see. maybe I think that I would have planned out, I would have been more intentional about what I was listening to. Like I love listening to music and you need it. I think it points to get yourself through the day. But like with audiobooks or with podcasts, just like had a better plan about what I was gonna do. Because man, I've talked to you about it and some other people, but one of the hardest parts about this trail was just the quiet, like the mental like quiet, like having no input from my phone or from news um or from people for long parts of the day.
Yeah.
You're just walking and you have your thoughts. And if you're not comfortable sitting with yourself, which normally I feel like I am, but there was some stuff that it was coming up and it just made it really challenging. So I wish that I would have been more intentional about, what I was thinking about or what I was listening to and just use that time in a better way, I think. And most of the time I wasn't listening to anything, just trying to um enjoy what I was seeing and whatnot. But so yeah, that's
It's easier said
something I
than
would,
done, you know.
yeah.
It's I don't know, were you finding that like you're kind of talking about being like alone with your thoughts. Were you finding that like bad, like not, you don't have to get specific obviously, but like were you finding that like bad things were kind of creeping up?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so
Interesting.
it was, I mean, I think that I'm a pretty good actor just in general, or I like to put on like a good face of like encouraging and positive. But man, there was long stretches where, and this is on my list too, so I'll just go ahead and say it. But
Yeah, do
I
it.
wish I'd have been more open um about those struggles, like the mental struggles, and a lot of just stuff that from relationships back home, or just relationships in general, or just comparing and contrasting my life stage, just a lot of that. Man, maybe once you get to 30 years old, you'll have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. But just things, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to think about and worry about. I don't like to be a worrier, and I really don't like talking about when I'm worrying. But a lot of that was coming up while I was out there, and it was really hard to shut it out once it would come up. And so, yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think you ever told me that before. In fact, I
yeah,
haven't really heard anybody really ever say that like that not that I mean obviously I'm sure it's happened, but yeah, like I never really thought about that. Like all the time kind of alone. We're getting really deep. All the time alone like you have with your thoughts, like having some bad stuff creep up. I don't know if I've really experienced that, but it makes total sense how it could. That's really interesting. I never thought about that before. So how do you
hmm
wish that you would have like dealt with it, I guess, but maybe just by being more open with other people
yeah.
about it, like you just said?
I wish I would have talked about it with you guys, or talked about it with my family, or just you know, feeling being anxious, and which is why, man, I like props to Flossie, and I think he's such a badass because he's so capable of being vulnerable, and I think that takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
to do that, and that's just it's a struggle for me. So I wish that I would have talked about it more, being anxious or being restless, or just saying what I was thinking out loud, because a lot of times, just because you think it doesn't make it true. And it's like,
Yeah.
um, so just, yeah, not to get too specific, but just like a lot of like self-loathing, like questioning some of my choices, things that generally I really don't worry about or think about, but was coming up when I was out there. And, um, man, there are times where I really thought that I was going a little crazy because I couldn't control how those thoughts are kind of spiraling. Um, and so, yeah, I think that I would have talked about it more, just brought it up in general. One of the things that helped me while I was out there, I mean, that I'm a Christian, and reading scripture like helped a ton while I was out there. In fact, I think that saved the hike for me, because the first part was physical trauma to my body. And then when it really, really sucked was the mental suffering. And had I not started reading scripture, I think that I don't know what I would have done, but in any case, yeah, I know we're getting deep, but
No, that's
that
okay.
is that is the thing I would have done differently, and I'm trying to do differently now. Like, I mean, shit, like it's not like it's easier to be vulnerable now talking about it. It still sucks, but um, just being open about how you're feeling with people that care about you is important.
Interesting. Wow, you're kind of blowing my mind a little bit right now. Um, was there any particular part of the trail that you remember or that was like the hardest when it came to this for you? I'm just trying to, because I don't remember ever really. I mean, like you said, I guess you're pretty good at kind of internalizing it. Like, I don't remember any part of the trail where you seemed like you were struggling
Yeah,
with anything like that, honestly.
yeah. It was like the. Do you remember? I think you did a. I think you did some form of post about your favorite campsite or one of your
Mm-hmm.
favorite campsites. It was that one that where you see that really cool waterfall, and we were right off of the edge. I don't remember, where we were at that time,
Um,
but you know what I'm talking about, that campsite.
no. Where, what?
Where, oh, I should have led with this. Where Flossie, talk about a funny story, where Flossie was pissed off and then he stepped on his avocado and we were laughing at
Yeah.
him.
I remember now. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That campsite. So anyways, like leading up
Interesting.
until not like specifically there. I think that was a turning point that day, but
It was like a little
leading
bit
up
north of
till,
Mammoth Lakes.
yeah. So maybe towards the end of the desert to like up to that point, um, it was a struggle. It was just a struggle figuring out why I was feeling these things, why I could not stop thinking about certain things. And um, yeah, because I typically being out in nature is where I find the most peace. And I didn't find that peace in that moment. And so it was a little terrifying for me. But
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Wow. That's that's really something. Damn. We're
yeah,
getting
man.
we're having some deep stuff on the Trail Tales episodes lately. It's nice.
Yeah.
Um, damn, dude. So I only have one more on my list, and it's kind of lame. Are there any like other big ones that you wanted to hit now that we're kind of getting towards the end?
That's all I got on my list,
Oh,
dude.
okay, perfect.
Hmm.
Um, all right, I guess I said it, so I'll just do this one real quick. The last thing that I think I wish I had done differently would have been just to be a little bit more social. Not that I was like anti-social, but I felt like I didn't really like get super close with that many people besides like you and 60 and maybe a few other people. And like there's just so many awesome people out on the PCT and these other through hiking trails that I feel like I kind of missed a little bit of an opportunity there. And honestly, it was kind of the same way in the AT. So I feel like maybe this is just not going to change. But looking back on it, I just wish I had maybe made a few more friends, a few more like
Yeah,
closer friends, maybe. But I don't know.
dude, I'll echo that a little bit because I at the beginning of the trail, I mean, I was like chatting up anybody and everybody I see, and like it's just you're kind of feeling each other out, who you're gonna hike with, and it's just one of those deals. But as you get into the rhythm of the through hike, it just becomes more about maybe a little survival, and then you just kind of doing your thing, and you get comfortable with the people that you're with. And I definitely felt like it wasn't a just you thing. Like everybody
Hmm.
kind of gets more like that and more into their groups, and then
Yeah.
um, it just becomes it's not as free flowing to just join a group and meet people, and I don't know,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely. Yeah. And I feel like another reason too for me was like in some spots on the trail it got pretty crowded. Like there was just a huge bubble of through hikers, and I feel like I didn't really like that very much. It wasn't anything personal against the people, but like just seeing like that many people and having to like kind of just have campsites be packed out every night, which is just how it goes. Like, and I knew this. Like, I shouldn't have let it get to me, but it did a little bit, and so I think that maybe made me just like kind of go inward a little bit when it came to some of
Hmm.
that stuff, which is not a good attitude to have, but it's hard to fight when you're in the moment. But I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
anyways, That's what we wish we had done differently on the PCT, everybody. Thank you for listening. And Brandon, thank you for coming on. We'll have to do another one soon. It sounds like we got a couple more ideas for the next one. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah. Do you want to plug your Instagram or anything?
Yeah, sure. Just first and last name, Brandon Sopher, not Gopher, Sopher. And that's it.
Cool. All right. Yeah. See everybody next week. Thank you for listening.